Blog Talk Radio.
Hello, everyone in the franchise world. My name is Paul Segreto, and this is Franchise Today. Back with me this week is co-host Stan Friedman, who's live in Washington, D.C. for the IFA event. Stan, how are you, and how are things going on in Washington?
Doing great, Paul, and it's been a pretty action-packed week. Lots to talk about. Lots of things going on that are relevant to our world, not just here in D.C., but across the country, as franchising is fighting back, giving back, and here to make certain that our elected officials all know the importance of what they're doing or not doing and the impact that it's having on our business model.
So I understand there's some breaking news with respect to the leadership at the IFA, and of course 2 weeks ago we announced that Steve Caldera had resigned effective immediately as the president and CEO. So can you give us a little bit of an update on that?
Yes, when I got up here on Monday, had committee meetings and the supplier board meeting, and announcements were made to us then that we could expect to hear that Robert Crisante, who had been his role was interim COO, but he's been with IFA for well over a year, acting as the head of our government relations department and executive VP of IFA. And so the announcement that was made to us was that we could expect to hear him being announced as president, not president and CEO, but just president, and that he would hold that position through the beginning part of next year, probably through convention, and that there was a selection committee appointed by the board, but that committee was not going to be actively engaged in doing any reviews of other candidates for the position, at least until after convention. And then there'd be a determination at that point in time as to whether he'd be seated officially as president and CEO, or if the search committee would continue to look for other candidates. All of that changed as quickly as we'd heard it, and not even a half hour before the program began officially yesterday at 2:15 p.m. was the announcement made that the board, in a meeting that preceded the opening of the program yesterday, had decided unanimously to appoint Robert Crisante as president and CEO, and the position was offered and accepted, and he opened the program in his new role for the first time, introduced as the head of the table for the IFA, and quite excited was he. He's up for the game. He's up for the challenge. He's been best suited for this role, in my view. To bring somebody from the outside at this time, Paul, I think could have been devastating, to try to bring somebody up to speed on all the things that are happening as quickly as things have been moving, and all the battlefronts that IFA has been confronting at the federal, at the state, even at the local levels. I think it really would have been a task beyond imaginable for somebody from the outside to jump onto that moving train at the speed it's been going. So there's a sigh of relief, at least on my part, and a great many of the people that I've spoken with here over the last couple of days. And there seems to be some calm in that Bob Crisante's in that role and has accepted the position and has done so quite happily. And I think that it's going to make for a better day as we move forward and go through these challenging and difficult times.
Yes, certainly it's a sigh of relief on my part as well. I don't think there could have been a better choice, especially under the circumstances, for continuity and a seamless transition. And that aside, regardless of the current circumstances, I mean, Robert Crisante has some, very, very high credentials. He was the executive VP of Government Relations and Public Policy. His resume goes on and on. I mean, he's a great person for the job, regardless of the circumstances.
Yeah. And he has a technology as well as political background. So, I mean, in today's world and all the things that are moving at the speed that they're going, in D.C. and with association experience, he's got quite a credential and quite a reputation. He's very well known in Washington, highly respected, highly regarded. And I think he'll just bring a new dimension to the position. Steve Caldera has given IFA his heart and his soul. He was a frontline roll-up-your-sleeves straight fighter. I mean, there's nobody I'd want to be in a fight having lead the charge that could do a more effective job than Steve Caldera when it comes to doing battle. I think that IFA needs to stand back and take a look at whether just doing battle is all we need to do. I think there are some paradigms that need to shift. I think we need to perhaps, and hopefully this is what we'll see in the year ahead, the association take a look at how to do something more than just box our way out of some of these problems that we're confronting. You can't pick and choose battles at the federal, state, and local level and fight them all. You don't have the resource or the treasure in terms of people and money to effectively do battle head on that way on every front that you're confronting these issues on. I think we need to get more into a jiu-jitsu kind of a mentality, and hopefully we're going to see some more of that. And I think we need to start swinging weight in our direction.
Yeah, and to your point, I do agree that Steve was perfect in leading the charge, especially such a visible charge. I mean, it was hard to go, a week without seeing Steve on, CNBC or Fox News or being written up in the paper, whatever the case might be. I mean, he was, extremely well spoken. He knew the issues. He was a fighter and a perfect charge. But I think that the tides are slowly changing going into a election year. And I think with Robert Crisanti's experience on Capitol Hill, I think it will. I think it's a great choice. Some additional you brought up about his technology background. He was also Undersecretary for Technology for the United States Department of Commerce. He was an advocate globally for the America high-tech industry. He was Vice President of Global Public Policy for the Business Software Alliance from 2001 to 2006. Well-rounded individual.
Yeah, he's got a lot going on.
Yeah, welcome aboard, Robert. We're behind you 100%, and we look forward to talking to you in the weeks and months ahead. And certainly, Steve Caldera, you've been a guest on the show 3 or 4 times. We appreciate your support of Franchise Today and always taking the time to come on the air and let us know what was going on. And usually that was right before the IFA convention. So I know Robert's going to have a very tight schedule over the next coming months, but we're going to reach out and see if we could plan ahead and get Robert on the show, probably after the first of the year. But to that end, I know you've been talking with various people up on Capitol Hill, and I'm excited about Paul Rocchio, Director of Membership at the IFA, will be our guest next Wednesday. And I really look forward to Paul's insight and perspective. Anything that you could add about your conversation with Paul?
Well, I think Paul is the guy who sits squarely in the position of membership growth, and IFA, like any of us in our own businesses, is always tasked with pivoting and being relevant to the issues of the day. And when you're bringing membership in, just as franchisors do when they recruit new members to their companies, you're having to properly manage the expectations and help people understand what it is they're getting involved with, and helping them understand the value proposition that an organization like the IFA brings to them, whether they're a franchisor, a franchisee, or a supplier. And so Paul, I think, is probably one of the most interesting people to listen to right about now, because on one hand you hear about all the attacks on franchising and how the business model is being attacked from every front. On the other hand, there doesn't seem to be a shortage of people interested in learning more about how to get involved in franchising, and the membership of the association continues to grow. You see everyone that's here with interests in franchising from each of those 3 fronts, franchisors, franchisees, and suppliers, up on Capitol Hill right now, today as we speak. And there doesn't seem to be any dissuasion of interest in franchising, there's a real dichotomy in all this. It's kind of hard on one hand to say, well, we're existentially being threatened but look at all these people that want to be here and still want to be involved in the business model. So Paul, I think, is in a really unique position, and I think he's going to bring some insight to the audience next week that's going to help clarify how the needle has moved in the direction, perhaps even with some insight into what we're looking at and changes in the direction that IFA will pursue in messaging in 2016. Getting more into that, jiu-jitsu mentality and helping to clarify for people, lay people, everyday people who really probably just really don't understand what franchising is, Paul.
Yeah, absolutely. So you mentioned about, people going up to Capitol Hill today. For our listening audience that is not aware of what's actually going on today, can you give us a brief overview, because you're seeing it firsthand?
Sure. So every year, the second biggest event that IFA promotes behind the annual convention is what's called the Franchise Action Network. And it's basically a fly-in. People come in from all over the country. Predominantly, IFA encourages franchisors to bring their franchisees. And we have a team of lobbyists that help us articulate the messages about legislative issues that are either compromising or even sometimes disrupting our way of doing business. And getting that message to the staffers and the members of Congress are what this fly-in is all about. So the lobby groups set all these appointments, and they schedule appointments so that those who fly in from their various states can group together, be sat down with a lobbyist who helps them understand the state issues that might be relevant in their hometowns, and help them understand how to pivot and position these messages so that when they're sitting in front of their legislators, which is exactly where they are right now, they're up on the Hill, and they're keeping scheduled appointments. So franchisees from South Dakota are sitting with their congressmen or with their senators, and the same true for all 50 states, helping them understand what's going on in the legislature that's impacting their businesses. We can go there as suppliers, Paul. Our guests can go there as franchisors, but there's nobody who will be heard and whose message will hit squarely between the ears of the legislators, as will the message when delivered by hometown franchisees who are creating jobs and driving income and opportunity back in these senators' and congressmen's home districts. It's a very powerful event. And it happens each year.
Yep, and it used to be called Public Affairs Conference, and of course that changed this year. And of course, our listeners can, follow the activity on Facebook and Twitter via Franchise Forward. So take a look and see what's going on. And I want to thank Deb Evans, our president at Franchise Foundry, and of course, who attended the event earlier this week and is now back and reminded me about listeners being able to follow on Facebook and Twitter. And as we know, Stan, your organization, FRM Solutions, and mine, Franchise Foundry, are the proud sponsors of Franchise Today. There's a lot more going on in Washington in the inaugural Franchising Gives Back, which is an honor from the IFA Educational Foundation last night to award winners for Franchising Gives Back. And, to that point, last week's guest, Brian Summers of Jersey Mike's, I want to thank him for being our guest, and they were one of the awards winners last night, the Enduring Impact Award. Because since 2011, Jersey Mike restaurants across the country have championed a Month of Giving program, and we talked about that at length last week. What were some of the other highlights of Franchising Give Back Awards?
Well, there were several that were given. Just bullet point a few for you. Denny's restaurants received the Spirit of Franchising Award. You mentioned the Enduring Impact for Jersey Mike's. CertaPro Painters was honored for supporting our veterans. Figaro's was given the award for innovation and impact. And there was a newcomer award given to Church's Chicken this year. Additionally, Paul, there were 10 other awards that were given as well to various companies for for recognition of their giving back. And, the whole idea here of giving back is what a great segue this is when we talk about how so many people might not really clearly understand what franchising is all about. When we see what's gone on in Seattle, and when we see an appeals court, a circuit court, upholding a decision that makes no sense to me at all, how can they possibly not get the fact that these are individual businesses, these aren't big corporate entities? So that side of franchising is the battlefront. This side is what franchising really is all about. This is about the synergy. This is about the camaraderie. This is about the alliances that you'll find in no other business model like you will in franchising. And I think these are some of those paradigm shifts. We need to get the word out there for people to understand that these companies aren't just taking from their communities, they're giving back in unbelievable ways. And another award that I would want to point out to you, Paul, that you might not know about, is an award that the IFA has come up with called the Sid Feltenstein FranPac MVP Award, which was given to somebody who's very, very near and dear to us, and somebody from your hometown, Doc Cohn, received that award.
You were saying that, and all of a sudden, I started getting chills. And Doc, as a franchisee, all that he's done for franchising, the time, the money, the commitment, has just been tremendous. And I cannot be happier. I'm at a loss for words. I cannot be happier that Doc received that award. He's one of a kind, and my hat's off to him. And love you, Doc. This is a well-deserving award.
And Texas, Texas very well represented here with another high-profile speaker who opened the day today, which is Catherine Monson from Fast Signs in Dallas. And Catherine led the charge today on helping everyone as they're getting ready to go up to the Hill understand how to make the most of the day-to-day, and making sure that she led the battle charge, if you will, for everybody in attendance to not just make the trip and have a memory, but to make a difference while they're there and to make the most out of this day. Who better than Catherine, who has been deeply involved in the FAN initiative, and happy that she was able to do that for everyone here this morning.
Yeah, and last week we read a press release about Shelley Sun's efforts, and that, along with Catherine, are really leaders in this. And actually, Shelley reached out to me last week. I had asked her if she could come on the show in the next few weeks, and we're trying to arrange that, and I intend on doing the same with Catherine. Got a note, saw a note yesterday from Mark Liston, our guest 2 weeks ago, who happened to be up on Capitol Hill with none other than Mary Kennedy Thompson and Dina Dwyer Owens leading the charge there as well. Again, another Texas organization. So really good things. My hat's off to all those actively involved doing what they can for this great thing we call, franchising.
And we'd be remiss, Paul, if we didn't call out and recognize Rourke Capital for their participation and their underwriting to making these awards and the Franchising Gives Back initiative possible with their generous contribution to the IFA's Educational Foundation to underwrite the effort.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for bringing that up. And, of course, we remember Steve Ermanello as the chairman of the IFA last year, and now back, of course, at the helm at Rourke Capital, which, of course, he's been all along. But, yeah, they do so much for franchising, and if you don't know about Rourke Capital and you're involved in franchising, you need to get out from under a rock, because they do a lot. So today's show, as we promoted the show, love your neighbor as yourself. That is what is defined as the simple mission of Christian Brothers Automotive, and one that has helped them drive franchise success since it began franchising in 1996. And this week, we have Josh Wall, Vice President of Franchise and Strategic Development for Christian Brothers, on the show. We're going to discuss how building upon a culture of faith and nice differences, and that's in quotes, and that comes from their programs, has helped the brand become one of America's fastest-growing full-service automotive repair franchises. Josh, welcome to Franchise Today.
Well, thank you for having me, Paul. Stan, it's a real pleasure.
You know, we certainly didn't expect...
You were just saying, you were just talking about the fly-in, and I'm sitting here listening to you talk about it, and I'm asking myself, why am I sitting back here working on just growing our business at Christian Brothers and not up on Capitol Hill with my brothers and sisters in arms lobbying?
If all it took was this day and this episode of Franchise Today to bring you to that realization, I know where you'll be exactly 364 days from today.
Yes, sir. Yes,
right.
sir. That's exactly right, Stan. I appreciate that very much.
Yeah, and I certainly didn't expect to run almost 20 minutes in some of our opening comments. It's usually about twice as long as we normally do. But, you know, it's an important time in franchising. And, you know, I had the honor a few weeks ago, Stan, I told you this, and of course Josh knows because they were the gracious hosts of the Women's Franchise Network here in Houston. They had a big event at their beautiful new corporate headquarters in the greater Houston area. But, you know, it was more than that. A lot of what we hear about what might be wrong with franchising, you know, is because there are some unhappy franchisees and what have you, for a variety of reasons, and we won't discuss that today. But what we will discuss today is an extension of what we've done over the last couple of weeks, which is really building a culture, and I could feel that within the Christian Brothers organization. I mean, we read about it, but I could feel it. I could just feel it by the energy during that event, the stories that were told by the various people that were represented by Christian Brothers at the event. And I even had an opportunity to sit amongst the attendees, and as various members of the Christian Brothers team had come down and sat in and we chatted. So, Stan, I know you like to find out a little bit about the background of the company, so I'll let you lead the way with Josh right now.
Well, thanks, Paul. So, Josh, I am interested in learning more about the value proposition and what it is that you guys bring to the market. And even before franchising, what was it that caused the founders of your company to get started and get into business and take such a dramatic spin and difference between their go-to-market approach as to what the paradigm of an auto shop might look like in the minds of most?
Yeah, that's great, Stan. I appreciate the question. And first of all, the founder of our company, his name is Mark Carr, and Mark is today still our president, CEO, actively engaged in growing this business 33 years later. And so when he first came to market, he wasn't a traditional automotive repair guy, but he was a car guy, Stan. So he loved cars, and he loved the idea of customer service. Didn't quite know how to put it together, and he was a burgeoning entrepreneur. And one night, he was in the graphics arts and display business. So he was creating murals and helping to sell those to energy companies and their and other related companies here in Houston in the late 70s and early 80s. And he was just unhappy, Stan. So like a lot of franchisees today that get into an owner-operator business, Mark was feeling like he was destined for more. He was feeling unhappy working for someone else as an employee. And so he got down on his knees. He's a guy who has a relationship with God, and he's praying and just says, God, I know you've designed me differently. Would you please bring me a business opportunity? The very next day, Mark is at an activity with his Sunday school class, and a gentleman walks up to him and says, Mark, you don't know me very well, but I'm a mechanic. I'm an honest guy, and I love doing what I do, but I don't know the first thing about business. Would you help me start a garage? And sure enough, Mark looks up towards the heavens and says, wow, God, you move fast. And from there, they were off to the races with the idea. They came to market as an off-site owner-operator. So it wasn't an owner-operator, it was off-site. And they did this for about 6, almost 7 years, Stan, before Mark came to the realization that this was a business that, although he wasn't in day-to-day, it wasn't doing anything special. It was just fixing customers' cars day in and day out. But he needed to be in the business. So Mark actually came into the business as an owner and an operator. In the next year, as a 7-year-old business, his business grew 30% in revenue. And it wasn't because Mark is really great with commercial auto repair. This is the first time he's actually actively operating in the business. It was because we believe, as we believe today, and our model suggests such, no one runs it like the owner. And so through Mark's presence, he was able to lead his team in excellent customer service. And so the guest service experience really began to improve. Customers had greater confidence in the fact that they were able to be served directly by the owner of that business. And through that, the model is evolving at this point, and through that, he had other customers who would come in and make direct suggestions about how to improve his business. And he immediately began taking those, not the least of which was to continually improve the aesthetic appearance of the business, to create a more welcoming, warm environment for his guests. And so Mark began doing so, began really investing in the infrastructure of the building, and specifically around the waiting area, the lobby. And so, Stan, today in a Christian Brothers Automotive location, you'll find hardwood floors and leather sofas and nice art on the walls. And the service team are typically in slacks and either button-down shirts, pressed button-down shirts, or nice embroidered polos. And so all of which is helping us to create a more upscale service experience. So
the Ritz-Carlton of car care.
That's right. Well, we're aspiring to that. We're firm believers in the good to great concept. We love Jim Collins' book. It's our secondary Bible here, and we love to aspire towards a company like Ritz-Carlton, but that's precisely what we're after. So
and
that, or go ahead.
No, it's okay. From one unit, what about the early stage growth and development? What led to the second and the third, and then the idea of actually developing further to the 100 plus 150 locations that you guys are proudly flying your flags on now?
Great. Yeah, great question, Stan. So from there, Mark continued to just serve his customers well, and the referral business grew tremendously. And so Mark was not investing significantly in advertising and promoting his business directly, and relied heavily on the word of mouth to drive that growth. Through that, he was able to retire the mortgage on his building and then his equipment even sooner than his term. So his business had continued to grow and was successful. And through that, he started having some neighbors and other friends approach him and say, "Well, Mark, I know when you got into Christian Brothers, you didn't know much about automotive repair. You've been very successful, and your customers love you. Can you help me do that as well?" And that very simple question, Mark never, when he incorporated in 1982, never aspired to be a national company, never aspired to be a franchise company. And so when that question first came up to Mark, he didn't know how to respond. And so he visited with a friend of his who helped him become a franchisor, and at that time build the UFOC, and then he began walking through the process with about 4 to 5 different people that had interest in doing that very same thing. And so our first franchise location was opened in the suburb of Houston called the Woodlands in 1996. And from there, it slowly grew within Texas, primarily in Houston, Austin, and then in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. And then our first outside of Texas location was actually in Nashville, Tennessee, in a suburb called Brentwood. And that location was our first family that moved from Houston to start a Christian Brothers, which is quite commonplace today in 2015. So,
Stan, an interesting thing is back in 1995, when I was a franchisee of Moran family of brands, now at the time it was Moran Industries, after being their president for a couple of years when I moved back to Texas and took over some underperforming locations, Christian Brothers, then one independent business, was one of my wholesale accounts. I know Mark Carr from way back when, and actually Mark and his team actually restored a Corvette that I bought, and and of course they introduced me to other businesses that they helped get off the ground, like Cornerstone Automotive and a couple of others that at the time were friends of Mark looking to get started. And of course this all preempted their venture into franchising. But I can tell you from first-hand experience, the guest experience was there back then, long before even an inkling of a thought about going national. They really did talk the talk and walk the walk. And I really appreciate you expanding upon that, Josh. Thank you.
It's such a different experience than the perception of reality that most people would have. I can't envision somebody that's treating me to an automotive experience in the model of a Ritz-Carlton expectation. I think that's brilliant.
Yeah, it is. What was interesting is, as Josh said, the first location was in the Woodlands, and of course that's where I live, and the original shop was about 50 miles from here. So there was plenty of times we were shuttling cars and transmissions between, the far reaches of the west side of Houston all the way up to the Woodlands. And when they made that venture into franchising, I was truly impressed.
So it was 7 or so years later before you became involved with this organization, Josh, and what brought you and the founders together? And you've worn lots of hats there yourself over time. So how about some insights to the growth and the development of the business model and bringing people from the outside in?
You bet. Well, it's been a pleasure to be a part of the growth here at Christian Brothers, and I joined the team back in 2003, and I came from outside of graduating from college. I was working for a political consulting firm doing some marketing and communications for them, and their voter contact firm, and a vendor of a lot of campaigns, ballot initiatives, and referendum. And I heard an advertisement in Dallas-Fort Worth, where I lived at the time, about Christian Brothers, and decided I wanted to dig and I wanted to learn a little bit more about this business, particularly from the franchise perspective, because it intrigued me so much. At the time, we had about 18 or 19 locations. At that time, primarily in Texas, Tennessee, Oklahoma, and Georgia. And I met Mark. He and I had lunch, and we just hit it off. He's a great man. And a couple of months later, we did not wind up becoming franchisees, but a couple of months later, he called me and asked me to join the team, and thought it'd be a great role for me to start out with in the company, opening up our new stores, doing some training, the operations training, and had a tremendous time really learning our business model, what separates us in the marketplace, and that is our guest service experience. That is the quality of the technicians that we recruit, hire, retain within the Christian Brothers system. And so I'll touch real quickly on that, Stan, and then I'd love to bounce over to talk about the franchise growth. But
sure.
With Christian Brothers, we are primarily a 5-day work week business. And so in our industry today in 2015, many of our competitors in the space are growing into not just being a 6-day work week, but actually open on all 7 days of the week, which can be convenient for customers. There's no doubt. No doubt. But we find that by being primarily a 5-day work week, so after the business is open for about a new franchise location with Christian Brothers, after it's open for about 3 months, closes on Saturdays and is only open Monday through Friday. That we believe that helps us recruit the very best technicians and service writers and sales managers that are out in the industry, and that has proved to be true. We're able to really recruit some of the very best out there. Now, coming back to your question, Stan, how does the model play into the growth of the brand? So, being more than 80% of our franchisees are single unit owner operators. So it is franchisee is on site, really serving customers, leading the team, helping build the brand recognition in the local marketplace day in, day out. And for some of our elite franchisees, they have the opportunity to qualify for a second store into our multi-unit program. But we don't sign a multi-unit agreement with anyone on the front end. And so there's a little bit of risk from the franchisee's perspective that they may or may not have that opportunity. So they need to look at our model and say, can I be content with this? Can I grow this to what I want it to be to produce the type of income and wealth building tool for my family? But the model is that the franchise, based on our franchise agreement, the franchisee owns his or her company fully. We license them as a franchisee in a specific protected territory for 15 years is the first term of our agreement. And the franchisee pays himself or herself a modest salary, health insurance benefits, and then 50% of the net operating profit. And that's what the franchisee earns out of their business. Christian Brothers has a royalty fee, but we don't derive it traditionally, or as most of the industry does, as a percentage of gross sales or net sales. Instead, our royalty fee is the other half, the 50% of the net operating profit, after the franchisee has paid all of their salary, general, and administrative expenses, which also can include their debt service. And that's how we've been able to grow this. So in 1996, Mark put this together, and we have not deviated from it since. And it is so because of that creates a little bit of accountability. It creates a strong check and balance system between us and our franchisees. And so we do require them to have, of course, a CPA reconciling their bank accounts and producing monthly P&Ls, conducting biweekly payroll. But we give our franchisees the option to actually hire. We have an internal accounting team that they can hire for a below market value cost to do that for them. So what that turns into is that we have an accounting team that actually produces P&Ls, reconciles our franchisees' bank accounts and creates P&Ls for them as their customers for the entirety of the Christian Brothers system. So today that's 147 locations. We're about to open 148, 49, and 50 here in the next month. But that's how we're able to create that check and balance system and some greater accountability within our franchise system.
Josh, it just begs a question at this point, a timely question as I'm in Washington.
Sure.
And so much of what's confronting franchising today centers upon the joint employer issues. With the uniqueness of your model and the way you engage with your franchisees, do you guys worry or concern yourselves at all that joint employer issue could come back to haunt you, or do you feel like you've got this pretty well figured out?
Well, I don't like to use the word worry or concern about it, but it is certainly. It's a great question, Stan. It's certainly on our radar. I think the NLRB has really overstepped their bounds, and furthermore, I would say they're taking it upon themselves to insult the entire franchisees across the industry, and so they're taking away the fact that these are men and women who have taken their life savings, their home equity, their retirement, and invested it in themselves to get a piece of the American dream and to create something themselves. And instead are trying to tie this back to make them a part of a large corporate, seemingly corporate conglomerate of some sort, just so they can try to attack us and grow their ranks. No, we don't like it, and we're very disappointed that they did not reverse their decision. But as we move forward, Stan, I think we're looking at that. We're continually trying to determine how that might affect Christian Brothers as we move forward, and we're working with our outside counsel to help us develop a strategy for that. But I think right now we're really taking the IFA's lead here to see how we need to prepare ourselves for the future.
I think you keyed a word in there that I hadn't heard in this context before in all the discussions that I've had with those that are up here on the Hill, but offended by it, I think is a really, really interesting perception, and I feel the same way. Actually, I'm insulted by it. The vicarious liability issues. People are trying to run a business, and then a responsible franchisor is providing what a responsible franchisor is supposed to provide, all the support possible to help you grow and cash flow and manage a business and create jobs and opportunity and service the vehicles of those that live in your community. And somehow or another, you let politics get into that conversation, and they're going to find a way to just screw it all up, aren't they?
Yes, they are, Stan. Well put. Well put.
Yeah, I agree. I couldn't agree more. We're live on Franchise Today. Our guest is Josh Wall, VP of Franchise and Strategic Development at Christian Brothers Automotive. Josh, we have a few more minutes to talk. And, the last couple of shows, Stan and I have been on with guests from the Dwyer Group, from Jersey Mike's, both organizations really built upon, values, ethics. It's built upon, culture. Explain some of the, or give us some perspective on the culture within Christian Brothers Automotive. And I'm talking about as an organization, as a whole. Sure. I'm talking about, relationships throughout the organization.
Yeah, absolutely, Paul. I appreciate you asking that. That's key to us, and our mission is simple. It's love your neighbor as yourself. And so we're taking that straight from the Bible, and so with that, how do we apply that? We have to be vigilant to apply that with each other, with our franchisees with their teams, and ultimately our teams with our guests and our vendors. And so it does take a coordinated effort, and it takes us reminding each other, and when we believe we're not doing that, when we are not treating someone the way we want to be treated, or even the way that they want to be treated, then we have to hold each other accountable. And so a lot of that, Paul, stems back to the people. And so we have to have a culture that promotes that. And so we spend a lot of time together as a family organization, first here at our corporate headquarters. And so that involves things like we get together and have really it's optional, but we can get together and have prayer time where we can encourage each other and put our arms around each other and say, we're a family, we're here, and we're here for you. We do that with our franchisees as well, and many of our franchisees do that with their teams in different communities around the country. And then we have to have fun while we're doing this too. So we're a company designed around seeking excellence in what we do, but we want to make sure that we're having fun while we're doing that. And so it is not uncommon here at the home office, Christian Brothers. We have about 70 home office team members here in Houston, Texas, and it is not uncommon at all for a random Nerf gun fight to break out on a Friday afternoon. And the different teams, you have to defend your area of the office, and so it is not uncommon at all for us to try to needle each other while we're having fun, while we're serving our franchisees, and sometimes that takes a Nerf air rifle to do that. So we have a good time while we're working, that's for sure. And
you also
that comes
cook
out
breakfast for each other.
culture.
And you cook breakfast for each other, right?
Yeah. So each Friday morning, we break the company into 4-person teams, and the team kind of comes up with a theme for the team, and twice to 3 times a year, that team serves breakfast to the entire company. And it's a personal expense that they're doing to serve the rest of their team members. And so we get to have a lot of fun while we're doing it. We get to practice having a servant's heart in our day-to-day business and make sure we're taking care of each other. So I know, Paul, you already heard the story, but I'm a big college football fan, and so I usually get the breakfast right before college football kicks off. And so we have a lot of fun, and we made a full football-themed breakfast, and everybody gets to wear their favorite sports team or college team or high school team that you like supporting. And then we did a contest. Whoever could sing their fight song the best, we gave them a little Starbucks gift card, and it's things like that can really, it allows everybody just to have a good time and get to see and learn about the people that you're building this business with. And so our franchisees take a lot of that and do that in their businesses. And so typically on Fridays, our franchisees are serving lunch to their entire team. And then a lot of their team bring their spouses up, sometimes their kids up. And this is during a work day. But we're doing this to really make it about creating a family-type environment, because if we were asking our frontline team members, those that we believe are working the hardest, they're the backbone of the Christian Brothers system. If we're asking them to give their very best to our guests and loving their neighbor as herself, we dang sure better be doing that with them too. And we better be doing that with our franchisees. We better be doing that with each other. So that's
tremendous.
Well,
big part of our
the
culture.
definition. That is the definition of culture, and that's the part of any franchise business that can't be copied, it can't be replicated, and it can't be faked. And that's the beauty of having a concept that is so unique in its approach to just principle-centered leadership and values and a strong culture. Hard for me to believe that company won't be 300 units in the next few years.
Well, we hope
hard
so.
to believe.
That'll be fun.
Yeah. Josh, I really we both appreciate you being here as our guest on Franchise Today. And, of course, to our listeners, please share today's segment, as it will be available on Blog Talk Radio as well as on iTunes. So, Josh, thank you again.
My pleasure. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Josh.
Stan, is an interesting story that I picked up, and I'd like to just review it real quick because it's really a feel-good story, just like, talking with Josh was today. And it says, and this is out of Tampa, taking that minimum wage part-time job 3 years ago paid off big Tuesday for Randy Bloodworth, an employee of a company that encourages its team members to excel. When the Dade City native walked into the Howard Avenue office of two men in a truck around lunchtime, her vision collided with an oversized check for $50,000 made out in her name. Bloodworth, 27, is now the co-owner of a company franchise. She's the winner of a national scholarship competition among two men in a truck employees called Moving People Forward, which prepares them to become franchise owners. For an entire year, she worked extra hours and traveled the country, learning the ins and outs of the business in preparation just for that moment. Shortly after Christmas, Bloodworth and her family will head to Pearland, Texas, again, the Texas Brigade, outside of Houston, where she plans to open a new office by March with that $50,000 in startup funding. I would definitely say this is the American dream, she said, just as the shock of her win began to subside a bit. The past year has been a very stressful year, she said, noting that she went from working 4 hours a week to working 60 hours a week and learning the skills she previously knew nothing about. It was worth every minute, she said, after accepting the check. Stan, great story. It is the American dream, and it is an American dream that should be not messed with by the NLRB.
Hey, I'm going to share one postscript to that, Paul, because there's a young gentleman attending the fan program here in D.C. this week who I met first at Springboard and who I saw on stage at IFA convention last year. His name is Alex Walzel, and he's from, he actually just completed college in the UK, but he's from the Netherlands, or northern Italy, actually. Yep. Alex was the Next Gen winner and is the recipient of a scholarship in the name of Aziz Hashim, $2,000 scholarship for winning that Next Gen competition. You know what he did with that $2,000, Paul?
What was that?
He invested it in this conference. He stayed in the States. He's touring and learning more about franchising, and his depth of commitment to franchising is to take that $2,000 and continue to be here this week. He's up on Capitol Hill. He's not even a citizen of the U.S., but this is a young man that's going to go places in franchising, has an interest in the private equity side of it, and he's got a strong resume to bring to a franchisor or a private equity company that would be interested in molding the clay and helping this young man's career in franchising as he grows and goes forward. I share that such that if anyone in our audience wants to get his resume or know more about him, just contact me and let me share it with you. We'd love to see this young man find his way into franchising, whether it's back in Europe or here in the States. But that's what makes for the next generation of what's upcoming in franchising. We've got to pay it forward and help young men like this one find a home, someplace that he can bring his talents and skills, someplace where more young people like him can help to continue the wealth and legacy that can be brought to families worldwide through the business model that we call franchising.
Absolutely, and I guess maybe you didn't know, I had lunch with Alex last week as he was in the Houston area going on his national franchise tour, and the night before he had spent, or actually 2 days before, he had spent time with the Dwyer Group and were guests in the home of Mark and Mary Kay Liston in Waco, and then as he was coming back through Houston, I picked him up at the hotel. We had a great lunch at Papacito's. We spent about 3.5 hours together before I dropped him off at the airport. Yeah, very, very bright boy.
This is what's right with franchising. This is what we need to be talking more about, not joint employer and NLRB and SEIU. This is what's right with our business model, and we just have to continue to press news about what we're doing in this business to the point of education and helping average everyday people understand that franchising is about doing commerce on Main Street and bringing opportunities to serve back to the communities that all of these franchised organizations are dotting the landscape across the country and around the world.
Yeah, absolutely, and my hat's off to Jennifer Cushell, a fan of the show, well-known franchise professional, has spent a lot of time working with young entrepreneurs worldwide. I've been in constant communications with Jennifer throughout Alex's trip, and we're trying to coordinate Jennifer coming on the show here in the coming weeks. And just to put a fine point on what you said about Alex getting his degree in the UK, it was his law degree. 22 years old. He has a law degree. He speaks fluent Italian, English, German, and French. I got to tell you, the boy's got a very slight boy's got a big appetite, and he really enjoyed Tex-Mex, as there wasn't a morsel of food left on his plate. And I want to give a shout out to Lane Fisher, because there was a photo that we posted on Facebook at Papacito's, and I didn't realize the sign behind me had said filet mignon fajitas, and Lane, who doesn't often comment on Facebook, said, what could be better than filet mignon fajitas? So I
will tell him you shared that shout out when I see him in about an hour.
Yeah, that was great. Well, Stan, another great show next week. Paul Rocchio, same bat time, same bat station. Any parting comments?
Just, the quickening of the calendar here, Paul. I mean, it's hard for me to believe we're on the doorstep of October right now. Just 2 weeks away from Franchise Update in Atlanta in the middle of October, and it won't be long behind Update that we're staring Frantech and the West Coast franchise in the face, and then the emerging Franchisor Conference to wrap it all up. I mean, this year is almost in the bag.
Yep, fourth quarter starting tomorrow, and the end of the year in sight, and it's been a good year along, and I appreciate our relationship on Franchise Today, as well as our relationship as friends. So be safe, travel safe. Hello to everybody in Washington. My name is Paul Segreto, wishing you the best, the very best, in this great, great thing we call franchising. And Franchise Today is out.
When you're part of a military family, you understand sacrifice and support. At American Public University, we honor your dedication by extending our military tuition savings to your extended family. Parents, spouses, legal partners, siblings, and dependents all qualify for APU's preferred military rate of just $250 per credit hour for undergraduate and master's level programs. American Public University. Value for the whole family. Learn more at apu.apus.edu/military.